I'm here with Kevin Fisher from the Art Discovery International, and we're here to discuss Mount Sinai. Now, where is the traditional location located?
It's in the southern end of the Sinai Peninsula. Now, this site is a traditional site. Of course, traditions sometimes can be wrong. In the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Constantine, his self-proclaimed psychic mother, she went down to the southern end of the Sinai, and she picked a mountain that she liked, and she said, "This is Mount Sinai." And in the 6th century, the Emperor Justinian, he built St. Catherine's Monastery there at the base of the mountain. And so more credibility, you know, there's a big monastery there. Of course, today there's a lot of tour groups that go there. But the problem with that site is there's no real evidence there.
It's amazing that one person has so much power to determine what is truth and what's not.
Tradition gets started, that's right. So if you look at the real site that the late Ron Wyatt found over in Saudi Arabia, now we're told in Galatians 4 that Mount Sinai in Arabia, Mount Sinai in Arabia, that's new, you know what? And also that Moses went to Midian when he escaped after he killed the Egyptian. And and he had the incident with the burning bush in Midian. And God said, "Bring my people back to this mountain." So Midian is a location for the real Mount Sinai. And Midian, in all ancient maps, is over in Saudi Arabia. Now, Herschel Shanks, editor of the Biblical Archaeology Review, he stated in Newsweek magazine that Jebel el-Lawz in Saudi Arabia is the most likely site for Mount Sinai. The problem is the country is closed off. You cannot get a tourist visa and go over there and take a look. So the area has been basically off limits. There's fences around the mountain, and there's signs put up there saying this is an archaeological area, stay out. But the evidence there is really incredible at the mountain.
Well, you clearly just said that there's signs all around that area that say that it's an archaeological site. So obviously, they know that something's there.
Yes.
Now, do the Muslims in that region, the Arabs, do they believe it's Mount Sinai?
They do. The locals there, they do point to this mountain as the real Mount Sinai. So when Ron Wyatt first went out there in 1984, he actually walked across the border from Jordan. They walked through the desert. And anyway, they made it to this mountain that he suspected was the real place. And the local Bedouins there said, "Jebel Musa Henna, or the Mountain of Moses, is here." And so you've got a local tradition. The top of the mountain is burned black from God's presence. It was a fire and a smoke, we were told. And of course, God spoke the 10 Commandments from atop that mountain and wrote them also. So it's a really incredible place. Out in the encampment area are these large boulders stacked up where the golden calf was placed on top of them. And there's a fence around that also, keeping people out, and a sign saying this is an archaeological area. But on the side of these large stones are these Apis bulls and calves on the side of these rocks, because this is where the golden calf was placed on top of them. So really fascinating. At the base of the mountain are the remains of columns. We're told that there were 12 columns at Mount Sinai, and you can see these round columns of a whiter material there at the base of the mountain. And you can also see remains of a large L-shaped altar at the base of the mountain. So this would have been relatively near the sanctuary. Of course, the sanctuary was off limits from the camp. And also on the mountain, further up, is a cave of Elijah, where he came down there. It was a 40 days walk, I believe it was, and lodged there in this cave high up on the mountain there. So, and then on the backside, to the west of this mountain, on the other side of the mountain, is this large 50-foot tall boulder on top of a 300-foot tall hill with a split right down the middle. And it's got tons of water erosion around the rock itself and on the base of the rocks around it there, the hill. just a large amount of water erosion out here in the desert, this huge amount of water erosion.
Now, I've seen that there's even images along some of those walls and caves, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there are images on the rocks there at Mount Sinai of, again, the bulls and calves and so forth, camels, people, also images of sandals there in the area. But very interesting. And there at the Split Rock, they've also found a altar which was built by Moses, and Jehovah Nissi, I believe was the name of it. And so also remains of dwellings there, circular rocks, perhaps they were put around the base of the tents, you know, these rocks. So pretty interesting site, but it's also an off-limit site. It's part of a military area, and people that have gone out there, they've been threatened with weapons and so forth. So again, it's hard to get out there. You can't get a tourist visa, and a few people have made it, and it's very interesting.
Well, hopefully you have the opportunity to go soon. I know that you have a few trips planned, but it's amazing. I saw an image that you brought with you that connected the dots from the Red Sea crossing to Mount Sinai and where the supposed sites were. And the distance in itself, it just proves that it's true, that it's real, that, you know, this is where the distance that the Israelites had to travel.
Yes. Right. They did have to travel a long ways to get to the spot. They were traveling as fast as they could, you know, approximately 16 hours a day, and that led them to the Red Sea crossing in the Gulf of Aqaba. And across the water from that is the real Mount Sinai in Midian. So it had to be a distant location. It wasn't just across the Gulf of Suez, right there in the Sinai Peninsula. This was a distant location, and it was a foreign land for Moses when he fled there from Egypt. So it wasn't right next door there in the Sinai Peninsula. It was over in Saudi Arabia, just as the Bible says.
Now, do you believe that Saudi Arabia will give us the opportunity to research this location anytime in the future?
They have been trying to keep it quiet. Some groups have made it out there, and they've confiscated their photos. I believe they're afraid somewhat of Israel trying to take that land, because it would be so important to Israel.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why they've tried to keep it so quiet up to this point.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. We love learning. We love the opportunity that we have to sit with you and actually learn more about these locations. It's just beautiful when our faith comes together and when we see evidence of the Bible truly happening before us. So thank you, and hopefully we have you again for another Q&A segment.
Thank you.
For more than 20 years, Ron Wyatt spent his life and his life savings on researching and finding the real Mount Sinai, Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah's Ark, and the Ark of the Covenant. Discover the amazing truth of Ron Wyatt's discoveries in a special series on Shabbat Night Live, AD, Archaeology Discovered. Special guest Kevin Fisher walks you through every discovery in detail, including his personal verification that the sites Ron Wyatt found are real.
You can see the four major discoveries: the Noah's Ark, Red Sea crossing, Mount Sinai, Sodom and Gomorrah. Those are visible things.
And welcome back to Shabbat Night Live. We are continuing with our guests. We have a ton of great things to talk about with Kevin Fisher. Kevin, you are the president of Ark Discovery International. Your website is arkdiscovery.com. Obviously, we're going to talk about Ark things coming up, Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark, and we've talked about Sodom and Gomorrah in our last episode. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about, in this section, the Red Sea crossing. Something that's close to Michael's heart. We've got a photo of it behind us, and you have a video you'd like to share with us. And you're going to tell us what's going on there.
Yes. Before we start the video, we have a map here of the Sinai Peninsula.
Okay.
Where the children of Israel, they left Egypt proper, which will be over in the Cairo area, for instance, and they traveled east across the Sinai, and then they were told to turn south, which that brought them down through the Wadi Watur, through the mountains, and then the Wadi Watur emptied out onto this large beach that we see on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula, and the western edge of the Gulf of Aqaba.
And that is Nuweiba.
That's Nuweiba, and that's where we're headed to. That's the Red Sea crossing site. So in our video here, we're going to go down to Nuweiba from two different directions. We'll first start out here in Cairo, and then from there, we'll head over to Nuweiba, and then in the second part of the video, we'll be heading down from Eilat, Israel, down to Nuweiba. So here, we're starting out in Cairo, and we're driving through the city here. You can see it's quite large. You see the minarets and so forth in the background.
So you're literally going to take us to Sinai in your car?
Yes, yes.
All right, this is great.
This is the route. We're going to actually travel almost the route that the children of Israel took, crossing the Sinai and going over to the Red Sea crossing. Here in the background, you can see a large ancient castle there in Cairo. Of course, they have a lot of history compared to the United States.
Yes, hundreds and hundreds of,
yeah.
if not thousands, obviously
Yes.
thousands of years there.
And so there's a mosque that we're driving by. Our taxi's taking us to our hotel at this point. But again, more of this large ancient castle there. And so the next morning from atop our hotel, we're looking down on the streets there in Cairo, and you can see the old world and the new world together. We see this donkey cart next to the traffic zooming by, and
Much like what you see in Jerusalem with the old and new city.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So the poor and then the rich, you know, also. So from here, we're going to be taking a look across the city. From this vantage point, you can look across the city here, and atop these type of condos they have there, apartments, a lot of the locals would bring animals on top of the rooftop.
Why did they do
Such as
that?
chickens and goats.
Okay.
So on top of these apartments, you can look down and see goats and chickens, and you can hear them. Here you are in a city, and you can hear, you know, chickens and goats. And here you can see a goat here on top of the building.
Pasture on the rooftop.
Yes,
Okay.
and so you know they from trash. A lot of these goats, they feed them trash. So from
Okay.
trash, they end up with milk and meat. You know, if they slaughter the animal.
Lovely.
But yeah,
Trash milk.
exactly, right. And so from here, we're going to look south, and in the distance, as we zoom in, we can see the pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramid, and so forth. Right here next to the city, it's quite amazing that you could see the pyramids right next to the city from a
That
distance.
is quite a sight.
Yeah. So a lot of history here going back. And so we're headed south. We can see the bent pyramid in the distance. We got our taxi taking us down to the step pyramid, and there it is. This is the pyramid that Joseph built, Ron Wyatt thought. And the National Geographic, they mentioned some inscriptions along the Nile River where it mentioned that Imhotep had saved his country from a 7-year famine. So does that
Interesting.
sound kind of like Joseph?
That is a little familiar, isn't it?
Yes. So Imhotep built this pyramid. It's considered the first and oldest pyramid in Egypt.
Wow.
He built it for his king Zoser. But at this complex are some underground vertical silos which held grain. You know, during the 7 years of plenty, they had to store the grain someplace. So a great place to store it would be underground where it's cooler. You know, the grain would last longer. And so at this complex here are a series of underground vertical silos. Now they had to bring the grain up, and so there's one exit point for these silos. And this is the exit point where they would go down and get the first grain out. The first grain that went in came out first. First in, first out. And so they went down these steps and carried the grain up in, you know, bags of grain. So Joseph was able to save his country.
So it's the
from
ancient,
famine.
ancient best before date system.
Yes, exactly. So this made, you know, Egypt very rich, the sale of the grain. So in our graphic again here, the map, we're going to go across the Sinai, and we're going to turn south and go through the mountains to the Red Sea crossing site. That's our destination. But you know, Solomon's seaport was on the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba at Eilat, according to 1 Kings 9:26, and it termed this body of water as Yam Suf, or the Red Sea. That is the body of water we're heading over to, the Gulf of Aqaba. And as we're heading east out of Cairo, we're taking our taxi, and we encounter the Suez Canal that we've all heard of. And along the way here, we have to go underneath the Suez Canal. There's a tunnel going underneath the Suez. It's over a mile in length.
That's one way of going through the waters on dry ground,
yes,
I suppose.
Yes. So our driver's taking us through the tunnel here, and we've got an abbreviated video segment of it as we enter. And it's a quite nice, but it is a small, two-lane tunnel. But then we come out the other side after driving over a mile, and we have just left Africa, and we're now in Asia. And we're going to go across the Sinai Peninsula, similar to the route that the children of Israel took. And
albeit not on asphalt.
yes, yeah. Right. Along the way, we saw this truck in front of us that said, "I love Jesus." Of course, we're in a Muslim country, but we thought that was interesting.
That's very gutsy in a Muslim country.
Right. And so we went through some checkpoints on the way, going through.
Were you ever questioned about your video along the way by those in the checkpoints?
Well, usually our driver would tell us to put the cameras down.
Probably a wise choice.
Yeah, right. We don't want to be hauled off to jail.
No.
So along the way, you see all the flat terrain. This would enable them to travel more quickly across the Sinai. They want to get out of Dodge as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. And
3 million people in tow, if not more.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So again, we're taking video, different segments along the way. Again, you see the flat terrain as we're heading further east. And again, this may be an area where we kind of headed south. And again, you see a really flat area where the children of Israel would have journeyed through here.
They would have never suspected that they would be entangled in the desert, as the word says, encountering a Wadi Watir after seeing
yes,
this.
I'm sure a lot of the men that knew the area, when they turned south, they became concerned, where is Moses taking us?
Right.
But
well, as Michael Rood points out in his video, Nueva, in the beach, you're pretty much cornered. You've got
yes,
wilderness to one direction and armies to the other.
Yes, right. And so in this area, we're getting closer to the Wadi Watur that goes through the mountains. Again, the flat, nice terrain. And here's the beginning of the Wadi Watur. It's a wider area, but you see the mountains on the right and the left. And plenty of room through here. It's a nice, generous, wide area.
You almost wonder if they thought, great, we're going to be hidden in here, and that's going to be a good thing.
Yes.
But was not the case.
They found out later, they came to a stop. So here's the wadi we're going to travel through to get to the large beach there. And this is where it will exit later. This is from Google Earth.
Can you imagine getting millions of people through there? That would have been a feat in itself.
It became tight at some point. But in the distance, we see the mountain we'll head to later in our next segment, Mount Sinai over in Saudi Arabia. But you can see the orientation of the crossing site to the Mount Sinai in this graphic here. So here we are, we're going through the Wadi Watur. We see the mountains. This is a nice wide area that we stopped.
And it's still fairly passable here.
Yes.
Does not look like a threat at all.
Right. But as it gets narrow, we can see here it's much narrower. And things were a bit congested.
And there is nothing there. I mean, no wonder they were concerned. There's no food, there's no water.
Yes.
Just a bunch of rock. And
right.
So...
And you can't take your wagons over top of these mountains here.
No.
Look how steep this is.
We have to remember, there's no asphalt in that day. I mean, there's no smooth road. They're feeling every bump. They're
yes.
likely twisting ankles trying to get away so fast.
Exactly. And so, winding our way through this narrow area, it gets more and more narrow. Here we make a turn through a narrow spot. And I think we may pan up at some point, and you can see how steep these large mountains are. So it says in Exodus 14, they're entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. So Exodus is telling us they're going through the Wadi Watur, they feel all shut in, they're entangled, they're winding their way through these narrow mountains. And
yeah, for those who argue a different crossing point, that verse would not make sense.
Right.
Where are they going to
Right.
be literally entangled?
Yes, and you can see how steep it is. Very steep there. We shot up there. And again, very narrow. You're not going to go over top of these mountains. But Josephus said, for there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight. So again, he is agreeing with what the Bible is saying about the mountains.
And even with more detail that would further
that it's
prove.
terminating at the sea. And here we're getting closer to the exit point, closer to the beach where they'll come to a stop. In the distance are the end of the mountains. And this is the end of the Wadi Watur. You can see here where it's washed out recently.
Now, had you wondered as you were approaching this, where did that fire come down and separate the Egyptians from the
We will
Israelites?
see evidence of it.
Really?
Yes, we
Okay.
will show that to you. So here we're getting closer to the exit point of the Wadi. In the distance is the beach, and past that we can see in the distance now the water of the Gulf of Aqaba.
Now, there's something on that beach modern, is there not? There's some kind of, there's some buildings there.
There is, and we'll see that, yes. So there's the Wadi we traveled through. We're now at the beach at Nuweiba. And now we're going to show you the second way to get to the beach, and this would be from Israel. Here's Eilat. It's Saturday evening. The day is ending, and the next morning we're going to head out through the Israeli exit point and then go over into the Egyptian border station here. And so the Taba Gateway, and we had our driver waiting for us, ready to take us. We're heading south about 50 miles, heading down to Nuweiba. And
This is the Israeli way.
this is from Israel, yes.
Okay.
You can get to it from Israel. And on the left, we can see the waters of the Gulf of Aqaba. So I'm here in the back seat. We see the water
Oh, there it is there, yeah.
on the left, the Gulf of Aqaba. That is the Yam Suf, or Red Sea, spoken of in the Bible. There is the Pharaoh's Island, built in the 11th century by the Crusaders. I guess they were controlling movement through the area. It's a very interesting castle. And here in Egypt, things are poorer compared to Israel, but a lot of vacant buildings, a lot of unemployed. But we're continuing to head south.
Now, when was this video shot?
This was November of 2016.
Okay, so this is after all the unrest and the Arab Spring
Yes,
and all the rest of it.
yes. And then there's Nuweiba, jutting out into the water, 5 miles long, 3 miles across. So it's large enough to hold 3 million people.
That is larger than one imagines seeing the photos from
Yes.
the aerial view.
In the background there is the Wadi Watur we came out of,
Okay.
emptied out onto the beach here. This is from our hotel. And you can see the Wadi Watur right there.
So this is what, minus the buildings, of course, this is what the Israelites saw.
Yes,
When they look
some-
back and saw the
yeah.
Egyptians coming.
Some have called this Piharoth, mouth of the hole or canyon, which is, you know, it's a major point to make note of because you're exiting the mountains. So it may be Piharoth. And then here is sunrise the next morning. You can see the beautiful mountains over there in Saudi Arabia and the sun coming up over the mountains. So very interesting. It's nice to be right there at the Red Sea crossing. And here we're panning across. You can see the mountains of Saudi Arabia.
So that's where they are going, but they have no idea how they're going to get
How
across.
they're
Can
gonna
you
do it.
imagine being on that beach, looking
Yes.
at that, saying, Moses, what have you done? No wonder they thought that we're
Yes,
dead.
right. But of course, Moses had full faith in God, that God would do something. He didn't know exactly what. But so here we are taking a look, heading, that's a viewing to the north. Our guide wanted us to come to his house for breakfast. He had his goats out front.
Oh,
Trusty old goats that eat the trash. And so our driver here on the left, we're here at Nuweiba.
so can people go out there like you did as on some kind of tour, or is this just something, an anomaly that you did and happened to find a driver who was willing to do it?
Well, I don't know of any tours going there, you know, formal tours, but it's mainly individuals that are going. We had to go through like 6 checkpoints to get to the spot.
So you've got to be dedicated. You've got to have
Yeah.
a reason for going out
Yes, and there's so much military there on the way to the Nueva, it can turn off a lot of visitors, tourists, I think. And that's what one of the hotel owners said. So here, our guide was giving us some tea, and then we headed out from here. We were going to head over to the pillar that marks the spot there
Okay.
at Nueva. And you can see the poor area of town, the Bedouins living.
Now this is the pillar that has been eroded over time, not the
Yes.
ones that the Saudis found on the other side, which was pretty much intact.
Right, this will be the Egyptian pillar we're heading toward. And yeah, it was found lying in the water. Here we can see it in the distance next to the road in the center of the video.
Oh, there it is erected there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ron Wyatt showed it to the authorities in 1978. The Israelis were occupying the Sinai Peninsula. He showed it to them. They brought it back from the water's edge and set it up in concrete, which was very nice. So today you can go there and stand beside this pillar.
And that's all thanks to Ron Wyatt.
Yeah,
Essentially.
and Solomon, who erected it to start with.
Of course, yeah.
So, you know, the matching column on the Saudi Arabian side had Hebrew writing on it still when Ron found it in 1984 that said Solomon, Pharaoh, Yahweh, death, Mizraim, which means Egypt, water, Edom. So this was a marker marking the Red Sea crossing spot.
Oh, and
this,
someone has made their own markings on it, apparently.
yes, unfortunately, but modern graffiti. But Solomon's seaport, Elath, was 50 miles to the north there at modern-day Eilat. And so Solomon, this was his area. This was his neighborhood. And so 400 years after the fact, he had these columns erected to mark the spot of the Red Sea crossing. He knew full well where this event took place.
So that must have been passed down from family to family.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
So it's a 16-foot red granite Phoenician-style column. Beautiful.
And there's obviously no writing on there. That's all been washed off now.
The back side of it has been eroded away. It doesn't look this nice, and that's where probably some writing was.
But that's a solid piece of granite. That's not like the
Yes.
Sodom and Gomorrah limestone that we saw. This is
Right.
It's
This is very solid red granite. It's very beautiful. So from here, we can get a look at where this is in relation to the water. It's set back. The water's a couple hundred yards away.
and this is the beach here essentially.
Yeah, this is the crossing area right here where the water actually opened up.
Wow.
Yes, it's amazing to stand here.
Now, is there a definite place on the other side that we can match up as to where
Yes.
from the beach?
The column that was cut down in Saudi Arabia, the base of it is still there.
Oh, okay.
So if you line these up, it's 13 miles across the water. Yes. So we're traveling through the local Bedouin village here. But up to the north, before we head down to the crossing site, up to the north is Migdal, or fortress, that is at the narrowest point where the water and mountains come together, is this fortress. And I imagine it was designed to limit the travelers going up and down through the beach there, heading north or south. And so this was some type of Egyptian fortress designed to control movement through the area. And inside the fort here, they had a nice well dug that would serve the soldiers here in the nice fort. And so some of the locals were following us in here, and they were showing us this well that the soldiers would have used.
And some kids sitting precariously on the edge.
Yeah, I'm afraid they might fall in there. And so we can look down and we can see a little bit of the water. And so that would have served them. So this was probably Migdal. And now we're getting ready to head back south to the actual crossing site. And here you can see the beach where the waters opened up. We're standing at the exact spot.
Wow.
Yes, and the mountains of Saudi Arabia in the distance.
Did your knees get weak sitting there? Was it an awesome thing
It was
to behold?
quite incredible, yes, to be there. And so in the foreground, right in front of us here, is a melted beach where the sand and the stones were literally melted together like concrete.
Really?
This is not loose sand. This is a melted beach which the pillar of fire created when it stood here. So
separating the Egyptian army
yeah,
from the fleeing Israelites.
Yeah. So again, this is more evidence, that confirms the location
My
here.
goodness. Now, how did you find out about that?
I had heard about it, and then I saw it myself. So here it is. You see, this rock is just infused in with the sand and the little rocks there, and this is all hardened. This is like concrete.
That is amazing.
Jason here is stepping on it. It's very solid. This is a different area.
How did the locals explain this?
I asked the hotel owner was here with us that we know, and he says, I've never seen this before. He said his hotel's in a different area, but he was amazed at what he saw. So,
well, there's the evidence right there. It's solid.
Right. And so a piece of it was broken off for us to look at, and you can see up close here all the little rocks and the sand. They're melted together, infused by the pillar of fire. And this goes on for some ways. This isn't just one little spot. And so Ron Wyatt went scuba diving out there, and various things have been found in the water. You can see human femur bone that is coral encrusted, which would be something you would expect. And on the left here, we see a normal one. On the right, you see the coral encrusted femur from one of the soldiers. On the top left, you see a human rib cage stuck in the coral.
Now, what about people who say, "Oh, this is table coral"? It's
not, because it has metal in it. And so here's a horse's hoof that's shriveled up when they took it out of the water. It's shriveled up. So again, we have horse parts, human parts.
What are we seeing here? What is this coral?
And so this is coral standing on an axle, and it has a raised center hub with spokes going outwards. Here's another round chariot with a raised center hub and then spokes going out, and it's got a round shape to it. Again, it's covered in coral.
Do some people say that these are just modern shipwrecks?
Some people have said that, but again, this agrees totally with the design of the chariot wheels. With the raised center hub and using metal detectors, there is metal in the center. There are spokes going out. This is a 4-spoke wheel with 3 spokes left. 4-spoke wheels, 6-spoke wheels, and 8-spoke wheels are found here. Of course, using the metal detector, like he's demonstrating here, all of the hubs here contain metal, and that is the design of the Egyptian chariot wheel with the metal center hub. Now here is a gold-plated wheel. There were 600 choice chariots used in the Exodus, we're told, so you would expect to find 1,200 chariot wheels here with gold, and this one is special. It's gold-plated, and 2 or 3 of these were found by Mr. Wyatt. Now we see a more shallow area where the Red Sea crossing took place. It's shallower here compared to the north and compared to the south. It's still deep. It has to be a deep area. It's 2,800 feet deep, but that gives you a 4% grade, which is manageable. Over in Saudi Arabia, you see the remains of the pillar that was found there on the Saudi Arabian side. It was cut down by the Saudi authorities. It had Hebrew writing on it. We don't know where it is. But there in the Saudi waters, Viveka Ponton went scuba diving, and she found this beautiful chariot wheel in the Saudi Arabian waters. So you have chariot parts on the Egyptian side, chariot parts on the Saudi Arabian side.
But it's not the crossing site. It couldn't be.
That's what the critics would say. But the evidence is here. It's real. So we rented a boat and went out with a ROVE, a remote operated vehicle. Had a 100-foot tether, and so we were going to do some little inspecting ourselves.
So this is a submarine camera?
Yes, for a few hours. And we didn't have days and weeks to do this. We had a few hours. We rented the nice boat here to take off. We headed down toward the south end of the beach. We're headed toward that area, and you can see the waters extending over to Saudi Arabia in the distance. And
so were you stopped by the Saudi authorities like Leonard Muller was?
Sometimes they do, yeah. If they suspect you, they'll come over and see what you're up to. But so now we're in the approximate area, and we're gonna throw the drone into the water.
So you closest to which land is that?
We're close to Egypt.
Close
here,
to Egypt.
Saudi, Sinai Peninsula. So we're getting it ready for another launching here. So here's the camera. It's got 3 propellers, and it's giving us a live feed back up into the boat. And so that day we were able to see something that looked round, but we couldn't confirm that it was a chariot wheel. So here we're launching it, and then here's an instant replay on board the Rove. The Rove's videoing this, and so we're down in the water.
So where you are is not that deep where you are right here.
Right,
Close to the
it's
land.
not that deep, yes. And so you can see some coral parts here.
But again, coral doesn't grow on sand.
That's
there has
true.
to be
It has
something for it to
attach
grow
to
on.
something, yes.
So obviously there has to be something down there.
Yes.
But this area is very remote. I wouldn't imagine that it's, you know, pieces from from modern humans, because why would they be there? There's nothing there.
Yes. So some of these objects here may be from the, you know, the Pharaoh's armory. We can't tell for sure.
This is fascinating. So we have the video from the Red Sea crossing. Thank you for showing us your trip down there. After the break, we are going to come back and talk about Mount Sinai, what's on the other side of the Red Sea crossing, so we look forward to that. Now, we're with Kevin Fisher from Ark Discovery International, and we meant to get into something before the break, and that was Kadesh Barnea. We're going to talk a little bit about that and then get into Mount Sinai. But tell us about Kadesh Barnea.
This is the second location where Moses struck the rock.
Okay, hold on. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Second location.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, the first location was at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
He was told to strike the rock, which he did. It split, the water came out. Well, they moved over to the Kadesh Barnea area, and he was told to speak to the rock. But instead, out of basically anger, he struck the rock, and the water came out. And so there's an area about 30 miles southwest of the Dead Sea that Mr. Wyatt found that he believes is the Kadesh Barnea site, where you can see a large amount of water erosion coming down the base of the mountain right there. So to get to the site, you have to drive out in the desert there, drive down some rocky roads. And in this first image here, we're getting out of our rental vehicle, or Avis. I'm sorry, Avis. But going down these little rough roads, and we finally got to a stop. We couldn't go any further. And so you walk about 2 miles through the desert to get to this mountainous area.
Okay.
In the distance is the area we'll be taking a look at, but you can see it's rather flat out here. This would have been kind of the area where the children of Israel would have camped. Plenty of level area here. And then this is a site where the water erosion is. You can see someone standing here. To the right of this individual is the site we'll be taking a look at where there's the most water erosion. But this is the site where Moses struck the rock. Now, in the next slide here, we can see a large amount of erosion coming down the mountain. It's eroded away.
Okay.
This rock, I mean, these are large cutouts in the rock caused by a lot of water. This isn't a trickle of water, but a real gully washer coming down here constantly, eroding away the rock into channels. There's actually large channels here as deep as 6 feet going down. And in the distance here in the left, where the individuals next to the stone, that is a baffle rock stone, they call it, where it was approximately 6 feet deep there, the channel that was being cut out, and the children of Israel stuck this rock down in the channel to force the water out, to spread out the water, basically.
Okay. Like a dam, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here you can see the eroded areas.
Still
These
some
are
pools there?
Yeah, these are deep. Apparently there had been a light recent rain here in this particular case when we were there. And again, you can see more of the eroded areas of the rock, more evidence of a large amount of water creating these deep channels coming down. And here we're looking down the side of the rock here, more of the deep channels.
So is this recognized by anyone as being this site?
It's not officially recognized. Again, this is one of the discoveries that's not recognized by the majority. And the next slide here, we see the deep channel, about 6 feet deep, where the baffle rock was placed in here, strategically placed. It's a wedge-shaped rock, forced straight down in there. And then here's the back side of it. You can see again.
Oh, that is a massive stone when you see it from that angle.
It's very large, and it's wedged vertically in there, like it was placed by the human hand in some way or another.
Yeah.
So, and just above this, we'll take a look to the right of this, but again, you can see the baffle rock, and then where the water would have run downhill out into the encampment to give refreshing water to the children of Israel.
Now, have there been any artifacts found out there, like some pottery and things?
Well, Ron Wyatt did find some pottery, grinding millstone out there. So artifacts have been found in the encampment area.
So regardless of what you want to believe, people did live there at some point.
Yes, there's evidence, yes. And using Ron's subsurface interface radar and gold detecting equipment, he did find an area where he was getting a reading for gold, where some of the people could have been buried in that encampment area.
Oh, so this so they wore their gold, and so this is a cemetery. After they were buried, they wore their gold to their death.
So some were buried with their gold. So again, this is a distant view. We can see way out in the valley there, and just above this site, above where the baffle rock is, we can see an area in this spot. This is probably 40 feet from the baffle rock. And this area here, this appears to have been the area of the source of the water that was coming out. And here you can see the exact hole. It appears that water was shooting out of this hole and running downhill. And you can see the water here, the rocks here have been worn smooth. But so that's the Kadesh Barnea that Ron Wyatt believes is the real site of the event where Moses sinned.
The second striking of the rock.
The second, yes.
A different location.
Yes.
Interesting. All right. All right, well, we're going to get into Mount Sinai now. We have another interesting presentation here, Kevin. So tell us about Mount Sinai.
So this is a photo taken in Saudi Arabia looking back across over to Egypt. This would be a sunset photo. You can see the nice palm trees here in the foreground. But some people are probably asking, why are you over in Saudi Arabia? The reason we're in Saudi Arabia, as we can see on the map here, is because the Red Sea crossing that we saw earlier is found at the Nuweiba Beach in the Sinai Peninsula, and it's in the Gulf of Aqaba. And Midian is where Mount Sinai should be. Midian is in Saudi Arabia, near the mountain here, Mount Sinai. All maps that are historically accurate will show Midian over here in this area of Saudi Arabia. Midian is where Moses fled to escape the punishment of killing the Egyptian. And 40 years later, he was at the mountain of God. And
because you will worship me on this mountain.
Yes, he was to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain, the fire incident with the burning bush. So he was in Midian at that point, and he was to bring the people back to that location. So we want to be looking in Saudi Arabia. So,
you know what I find interesting too is even though Ron Wyatt and Michael Rood and others say it's here, they're not the only ones. You have on your website some other quotes from some very knowledgeable and notable people.
Yes.
For example, Dr. Roy Knutson, he's a professor of biblical archaeology, says the visible evidence is quite overwhelming that the location of the true Mount Sinai has been discovered in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Herschel Shanks, you mentioned Herschel Shanks to me when we were talking before the program. He says Jabal al-Laz is most likely the site for Mount Sinai. And then Dr. Dean McKenzie, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Oregon, says the evidence points to northwest Saudi Arabia as the location of the actual Mount Sinai.
Yeah, so there are, quote, authorities out there that are agreeing, yes, this is the correct mountain. And this is the place where Ron, he crossed the border in 1984 on foot from Jordan into Saudi Arabia, he and his sons, and they walked through the desert. It was a very strenuous hike for them, and that's when he was taken prisoner, supposedly, being accused of being an Israeli spy. But Ron Wyatt found this mountain there, and he asked the locals, and the locals said, Jebel Musa Hena, or the Mountain of Moses is here. And so you've got a local tradition out there that, yes, this is the Mountain of Moses, and of course they do respect Moses, the Muslims do.
Now there's two names there, Jabal al-Lawz and Jabal Musa?
Yeah, Jabal Musa Henna. They call it the
Henna.
Mountain of Moses.
Okay.
Yeah, is what they call it.
And we're talking about the same place?
Yes, same
mountain.
place, same
Okay.
as Jabal al-Lawz, yes. And so here is the beach on the Saudi Arabian side of the crossing site there.
Where the Israelites came over,
Yes.
from Nueva.
And that's where we saw in the previous segment where the chariot wheel was found.
Ah, okay.
In these waters here, so this is a continuation of the crossing site. And so from the beach area, you can also see where the column was cut down. The column that had the writing on it, death, Mizraim, Pharaoh, Yahweh, Solomon, water. So this was a column marking the spot for the Red Sea crossing. The authorities cut it down and took it someplace. We don't know where it is.
And what's interesting, there's two columns, and people might say, oh, well, that's just each culture had their own traditions of raising columns for this and that. But these are matching columns. They're the same granite.
Yes, they're from opposite sides of the crossing site, strategically placed, and then you have the chariot parts in these same waters. So they were placed there on purpose, for a reason. Pillars were used, in ancient times to mark places or events. And so, we can trust these columns in this particular case. Solomon's Seaport was just to the north. He knew of this area, what was going on here. So in our next slide here, we can see Tim Mahoney in the foreground, and in the background, you can see the split rock, the first split rock.
Yes, okay.
So we went from the second one back to the first one here. And of course, Tim Mahoney, he is with the website patternsofevidence.com. They're putting together a documentary on this and the Red Sea crossing. But you can see in the distance the split rock on top of a 300-foot tall hill. The split rock is 50 feet in height. It's a very prominent rock. Now in Numbers 20:11, and Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. So God provided for them. He gave them provision. And
water for 1 million people.
Yes.
And probably several million
so
animals.
Probably 3 million people, plus their livestock. So some people have been able to make it over there. The country is closed. You cannot get a tourist visa. So to get into the country is very difficult. And then getting out to the site, you have to have permits usually just to get to that area. But here you can see the split rock where you can see a large amount of water erosion. A large amount of water erosion coming down from the rock. In the foreground here, you can see channels being cut into the rock. The water has eroded the rock to a smooth surface here.
And this is the rock that in modern Western times that Jim and Penny Caldwell, I mean, the Bedouin have always known this is here, but this is where Jim and Penny Caldwell discovered this one. Yes.
After Ron discovered the mountain, Jim and Penny went out there and they also found this rock. So very, very large rock. The split in the rock is so large you can actually walk through it. And a large amount of water erosion inside the rock itself. Here you can see how it stands out prominently above the peak there. And so here you can see the split in the rock where a person could walk through it. When God split it, it sure split, and then the water erosion coming up out of there, spewing up, it created more space probably in the rock, eroding it away. And you can see water erosion coming down from the rock.
Yeah, and even if you saw this and you were a skeptic and said, well, that rock has always been split, it's just it's a natural outcropping, and that erosion is wind erosion, well, you're not going to have wind erosion flowing down in a pattern similar to what water would create.
Yes, this is definitely water erosion coming down. Again, this is a desert area, very little rainfall at all out here, and yet all this water erosion you can see on the rocks coming down from this giant split rock. So God did provide water for them lovingly, even though they were impatient and rebellious, kind of like us, I guess.
Aren't we all? Yes.
Yeah. So in our next slide, you can see Ross Patterson. He's standing next to the split there in the rock.
Now, those who are not familiar with Ross Patterson, who is he in relation to all of
He's
this?
a friend of mine in New Zealand who
Okay.
also promotes Ron Wyatt's work.
Oh, very
and does
good.
presentations, and he was able to make it out there. And so our next slide, we can see the altar Jehovah Nissi in the foreground. And in the background, we can see the split rock once again standing up. Very prominent rock in the background. And
So this is an altar of some
this
kind
mentioned
here.
in the Bible, yes, this altar. So again, this is matching the biblical account once again. And there's also some circular rock formations. I don't know if they held the bottoms of the tents down or something, but you see some round rock formations where the children of Israel were encamped in this
So
area.
that's similar to what we find in North America with the Cherokee Indians and such across the country, that in certain areas where they would camp, there's these circles where their tents were.
Okay, yeah, the
at different
teepees,
times of the year, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So over on the other side of the mountain is the front of Mount Sinai, and you can see in the distance the blackened peak of the mountain. Once again, the Bible says that the mountain was a smoke. It was on fire. And so the mountaintop here is blackened. When you walk up to the top of the mountain, several people have, you turn the stone over, the top of it's black, the bottom of it is brown.
Really?
So there's evidence that it was burned on top, and the natural color is on the bottom, and it's brown.
Now that answers a question I was going to ask, and you've already answered it, because I have heard a secondary theory that this is just a different type of rock. It's a black rock that happens to have this line right at a certain point near the peak.
Yeah, but that's not the case. Yeah, this is a burned mountaintop because underneath it, it is brown material. So it's actually a day hike to make it to the top of the mountain and to make it back down. Strenuous walk. But people have been up there and they've seen the blackened, burned.
And that is the tallest mountain in the area.
It is. The upper 2/3 of Saudi Arabia is the tallest of mountains, and that's another clue that ancient historians have said that it was the tallest of mountains in Midian, and that's what it is.
Here it is from Josephus. We were just looking at that now.
Yeah.
Josephus said that Mount Sinai was the highest of mountains in the city of Midian, which is just outside of Al-Bad.
Yes, Al-Bad is 15 miles to the south.
Okay.
And Al-Bad is where Jethro is from. On some maps, you'll see the name Jethro next to Al-Bad. And the caves of Moses are there also at Al-Bad.
And also Philo said that Mount Sinai was located east of the Sinai Peninsula and south of Palestine, which puts it again in this vicinity.
Again, we're in the correct location. So you have all these ancient historians identifying the site, and you have the Bible saying Mount Sinai in Arabia, Galatians 4. So it's pretty incredible. It's been lost for so many millennia, and yet here it is coming out near the end of time for a demonstration of truth for mankind. So Exodus 19, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. My friend Aaron Sin was out there around 2003 with Tim Mahoney, and again you can see the blackened peak in the background, and at the base of the mountain, we'll see a little bit later, is the remains of an altar. Once again, fitting the biblical account. You can see a guardhouse on the right edge of this photo. They put a fence around the front of the mountain and a guardhouse and a sign telling people to stay away. This is an archaeological area. So the Saudi authorities are recognizing this as an archaeological site.
They know.
Yes.
They know darn well what this is.
Sure. And then another photo here from a distance further back from the mountain. You can see again the encampment area, and the left side of the photo in the distance, that's an area where Elijah's cave is. And here in the very center of the photo is Elijah's cave. It's in a shadow, but it's in kind of the very center of the photo here. Yeah. And he, Elijah, arose, he did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God, and he came thither into a cave and lodged there, 1 Kings 19.
Now, how many people would catch on to that this is the same? Because we hear of Elijah's cave, but normally you wouldn't tie the two together. You wouldn't stop at Mount Horeb. Oh, yes, that's right. This is the same place. You know, it's funny that it's just all in the same area.
Everything matches here, you know, the biblical account. And this is taken from inside the cave, and we're looking out into the valley below. This is quite a photograph here.
Wow. Is it not?
Well, actually, those are Bedouin buildings out in the far distance. But just in front of that, toward the mountain a little bit, is the fencing they put up, the Saudi authorities, to keep people out. There is, remains of an altar, remains of pillars at the base of the mountain. Here's another photo of the cave. It's not real deep, but nevertheless it is something to provide shelter from the rain and so forth. Now, Google Earth, you can look about 20 miles southwest of here, and you can see Elim. Elim was where there were 12 wells and 70 palm trees, we're told. And if you go there today, there's still 12 wells at this site.
So this is no doubt Elim.
Yes. So this is, again, confirmation we're in the right area. And
it's on the right trail. It's on the way, is it not?
Yes, it is. Right. And so we're back at Mount Sinai again, and Ross Patterson is pointing to a spot in the distance. This is where the golden calf incident took place. We're going to see that shortly. But this will give you an idea of how Moses is coming down the mountain, and he could have seen the dancing and the apostasy taking place. And of course, his anger became hot, righteous indignation against the apostasy of the people. In Exodus 32, and it came to pass as soon as he came nigh into the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. So that's what he saw. And here we can see, this is an aerial view of the large rocks where the golden calf was placed on top of this. The Saudi authorities, they have placed a fence around this once again, and there's a sign saying this is an archaeological area, stay out.
And the clue is that there are paintings on the side that are not indicative of that area, are they?
That's right. You've been there, I guess. Right?
I've seen photographs.
Okay. Yeah. So here we are. This is a closer shot of it. And on the sides of this, as you say, there are inscriptions of the Apis bull and so forth on the side of this from Egypt. So they came from Egypt. They're accustomed to this, Egyptian bull designs and so forth. And here Ross is next to one of them.
And that is not native to that area.
Right,
That's the key.
The Saudi locals, do not draw this type of Egyptian drawing on the rocks, in their area. So this is something brought over from Egypt, these designs and so forth. So, and then Ross is next to some other carvings here, more bulls and calves, and you see a camel and so forth. So a lot more inscriptions here showing people were here, and again, it's tied back to Egypt.
Now, how long ago was this that you could get that close to this? Because you can't do that anymore.
Right, you can't get a tourist visa. You have to get some sort of special permission from the government. You can't just send in an application for a tourist visa. You have to get a special permit, and that's extremely difficult.
And you would have to hop the fence now, too, to get this kind of photograph.
Yes, to get inside some of these areas, you can go around the fence. Some of them have. But of course, they're not damaging anything. They're keeping everything pristine. So, and here's some more drawings Ross is next to. This is out in the encampment area.
Oh, so this is not at the altar itself. There are more of these.
These are a little bit away from the actual golden calf altar. These right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then this is Dr. Kim, who was out there, went out there 12 times. He worked for the Saudi prince, and he found numerous drawings out here also. He also found these artifacts, incredible amount of pottery and so forth in the encampment area.
And he was, wasn't he a personal physician to the king?
He was to one of the princes, yes. Yes. And then he found, if you can see here, the arrow's pointing to a menorah.
Wow.
He found an inscription of a menorah where it was actually made there at Mount Sinai, the golden candlestick. So this is where it was made, and this is the oldest image ever of the menorah or golden candlestick.
And again,
he found it there.
Even if you were to argue that, what would a Hebrew inscription be doing in the middle of a Muslim Arab country?
Exactly, yeah. This is showing the Jewish roots of these drawings out there and of the people that were there. And then Ron Wyatt found this millstone in the encampment area. Once again, evidence of the people occupying, and this would have been used with manna, grinding up the manna. So this is, a manna stone, so to speak.
Wow,
Pretty
absolutely
incredible.
amazing. We're going to come back next episode with the Ark of the Covenant. So we'll talk to you more about that. And in the meantime, thank you for watching. Please support this program. You are our only means of support. There are no corporate sponsors. You make it happen. So go online to aroodawakening.tv/give, and you can give there or give us a call at 888-766-3610. Until then, next week, we will see you.